CNN Breaking News.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of CNN Newsroom. I'm Lynda Kinkade. We're going to start with breaking news this hour. A passenger plane has crashed near Moscow. Russian state media say there are no survivors from 71 people who were on board that plane. Now, it disappeared off the radar shortly after takeoff from Moscow airport. It was destined for Orsk, a city in the southern mountains of Russia, but it crashed early into its flight. CNN's Mathew is at Moscow airport, but first I want to go to Fredrick Pleitgen at the scene of the crash. And Fred, from what we've been seeing, there is debris spread across quite a wide area there, and investigators have just recovered one of the black boxes.
Yeah, they certainly have. They've recovered the flight data recorder from what we're hearing here from the field. It is actually just a couple of hundred yards from where I'm standing right now. It's been very interesting to see how quickly the Russians have been able to move large machineries and also a great amount of people into that field to try and recover whatever they can. Of course, one of the big things that the first thing that they've been able to recover has been that flight data recorder, where they obviously hope to get a lot of information from that data recorder to find out possibly what exactly happened to that plane. As you mentioned, it took off at around 2:21 p.m. local time from Moscow Domodedovo Airport, which is one of the big international airports here in Moscow. It didn't stay in the air for very long. In fact, the village that I'm in right now is only about 45 miles, maybe 60 kilometers away from Moscow, and that is where this plane came down. Now, the Russians are saying that there are several things that they're looking into. One of them might be mechanical failure of the plane. One of them might be pilot error, or it could also be the weather. Keep in mind that the weather was really difficult throughout the better part of today. In fact, only about an hour after this plane came down, I actually landed at Domodedovo Airport, and while we were coming into land, we still had a pretty big snowstorm that was going on. So weather is certainly one of the things that the authorities are looking into, but right now, the main thing they're trying to do is move as much personnel and machinery into that field to try and get that recovery operation going, because of course there's so much snow on the ground as well, which is making things all the more difficult, Linda.
Yeah, certainly really difficult conditions there. And Matthew, you also experienced those conditions in the air, landing at Moscow airport not long before that flight took off.
Yeah, I think we probably landed here at Domodedovo Airport around about the same time, perhaps a little after the plane was lost from air traffic control and their radar. So about sort of 2:30 local time here in the afternoon. And before we came to land, as Fred was saying there, was his experience as well. We had to circle Domodedovo Airport several times. The captain of the aircraft came over the tannoy and said, look, the reason we're doing that is that there are snowstorms in the area. Moscow has, of course, been experiencing some of its heaviest snowfall in decades over the past couple of weeks. I mean, and that's saying something, given that the Russian capital is well used to having heavy snowfall at this time of the year, but in decades it hasn't seen it that much. And so I expect, and in fact we know this to be the case, that accident investigators now on the scene where Fred is right now tonight are looking at all possibilities, technical failure, even the weather, as being factors in the cause of this crash of this Antonov 148. The flight recorder, as Fred reported, one of them at least has been retrieved. When that's decoded, I think we're going to have much more clarity on what exactly happened to this aircraft with the loss of 71 lives, Linda.
Exactly, and hopefully we will start getting some of that data in the next 24 hours or so. I want to go back to Fred, who is on the ground of the crash site. Fred, just give us a sense of what you know about this particular plane and the airline carrier that operates it.
Yeah, the airline is actually a very small one. It's called Saratov Airlines. Only has a few planes, and it is actually also one of the few carriers that operates commercially, the Antonov 148 jetliner. Now, the plane itself is actually quite an interesting one. The An-148 is made by Antonov Aircraft, so it's made both in Ukraine as well as here in Russia. From what we understand, the plane that crashed today was one that was manufactured in Voronezh in Russia in 2010. So it's still a fairly new aircraft, and in fact, this entire aircraft model is a fairly new plane, only went into service in 2009. So it'll have all the modern features that other airliners have as well, from LCD cockpits to modern avionics. All those kind of things will have been there. And it's also quite a small aircraft. It carries somewhere between 65 and 88 passengers, depending on the configuration. So a small regional jetliner, but also one that was specifically designed to operate in the kind of conditions that you have here in Russia, specifically in Moscow at this point in time, to land on runways that maybe aren't completely up to standards, but also to fly in tough weather as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what the investigators find as they look into this crash. And I can tell you, from what we're seeing right here on the ground, Lynda, there's no sign of them in any way, shape, or form slowing down. In fact, there's more and more trucks and specialized vehicles, even snowmobiles, that are moving in here to try and intensify that search as much as possible, Lynda.
Yeah, no doubt it will be a very busy night there, Fred. I just want to go back to Mathew on what the Kremlin is saying about all of this. Obviously, it's a massive disaster. 71 people on that border. No one survived.
That's right, and it's by no means the first airline disaster that has afflicted Russia. And in an election year like this, there are general elections, presidential elections scheduled to take place next month. President Putin, the country's leader, has to be seen to be doing everything he possibly can to make sure that an investigation is thoroughly held, and that they get to the bottom of this problem and try and sort it out. And indeed, the Kremlin has issued a statement along those lines. This is what it says: the president instructed the government to create a special commission in connection with the plane crash in the Moscow region. Putin, the president, also instructed the relevant departments to conduct the necessary search operations. That's according to Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov in a written statement to the media. And again, this is important for the Russian president to show that he's on this. He's cancelled a trip to Sochi in southern Russia tomorrow, where he was scheduled to meet the Palestinian leader. He's going to be having that meeting instead in Moscow. He's also offered his condolences, of course, to the friends and the family of the 71 people on board that Antonov 148 who lost their lives apparently shortly after takeoff here in the Moscow region. Lynda.
Yeah, less than 10 minutes after takeoff. All right, Fredrick, Pleitgen and Mathew Chance, good to have you both on this story for us. Thank you very much.